Hey kids, howdy and welcome once again to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. It is February 3rd and I'm coming at you with a little bit of laryngitis still. In fact, Zoe and I, breaking the fourth wall, we had to record late this week because I had no voice early in the week. So if you tuned in last week, and I got a lot of feedback about how, my little angry diatribe,
Yeah.
it is really interesting to me, Zoe, and I think you can appreciate this, that my doing that had some energetic and emotional risk for me. And that podcast came out on Monday, and on Tuesday I lost my voice.
Oh my God.
Right? So on a certain shadowy level, like I have to look at that, right? Why did this little laryngitis virus that does live inside my body, that comes up every year or two for a little visit, why right after I put my voice out into the world in a risky kind of way? But I gotta love it, right? So here I am back to work after having to take a couple of days off. Meanwhile, yesterday was my Venus retrograde webinar live. You can still get the recording and the handout, so please head over to michaellennox.com and get that if you're interested. It is the first Thursday of the month this week, so I will be back at Global Healing Meditation. In fact, I'm going to talk a lot today about things that I'm also going to talk about Thursday night, because there's some really interesting stuff going on in the sky with the Pisces stellium right now, and stuff that's happening all year at the end of Pisces and early Aries. So I really want to dive into that today. So instead of answering a question today, I'm going to do a little teaching about what we call the birth canal of the zodiac. The most sensitive point in the cosmos, in terms of the astrological lens, is the very last degree of Pisces into the 0 degree of Aries. That's the 360th degree and the very first degree of this circle that is, the hallmark of astrology. So there's an elegance to astrology with regard to the evolution through the zodiac, right? There's an order to the signs, and that order has information. It's not random. And there's an evolution of consciousness through the signs. Now, before I go any further, I'm not talking about you and your sun sign, right? I'm not talking about people here. I'm talking about the archetypal setup of astrology that is these 12 separate archetypes of 30 degrees each in this order. So there's this elegance of evolution that allows each next sign to build on what the previous signs offered us. I do this in my teaching. If you ever study astrology and learn how to read your natal chart with me, you're going to hear me talk about the signs in this way, that it's this archetypal community of 12 different constellated energies put together. We can create every human experience we need by having these 12 different pure energies that work together to create the human experience. They're very, very different. And it starts with Aries, right? So we got this fire of Aries that says, I am. But if we back up to Pisces, the last sign of the zodiac, that's where there's no form at all. It's just all potential. And in that void of the potential of Pisces, Aries is that energy that rises up first and says, I'll go. So right there, you can see that Aries might be the startup energy that you already understand. But now that startup energy has a deeper meaning when you realize that it's poised to come after the void of connection to everything and all potential of Pisces. So then once Aries dives in and says, I am, and we have the world of form created, the very next sign, Taurus, takes us into that form. And it's in Taurus that we create the earth herself. So once we're here and we're grounded on earth, we want to connect with each other to make something occur. So Gemini gives us the words we need. Then Cancer offers us the ability to preserve, protect, and recreate it over and over again. Leo says we're here to dance with joy. Virgo says, well, I'll create this body that Aries invented and fill it with systems that allow you to move through life and dance with the joy that Leo invented. So it's like, you don't get the how to dance with the Virgo systems until Leo invents joy itself. And then once you've created all of this in a body, you can then reflect that body with others, and Libra tells us that it's a mirror. Then once we understand it's a mirror, it's the change and transformation of death and rebirth that allows us to keep going, and that's what Scorpio brings. Well, once we've mastered like death, we can explore higher truth, Sagittarius. Once we have all of that under our belt, we can build something of significance, and Capricorn gives us that capacity to build form. Then Aquarius comes along and says, all right, now that we have us in bodies and we're reflecting consciousness and we've got form, let's create a community. And Aquarius brings us that. And then we're back to Pisces in that sense of we finish up in the same place that we start, in the connection, the collective, the place where all form is sort of absent, but we marinate in the pre-form potentiality. The same kind of evolution exists in the elements. The first fire sign is less sophisticated than the second fire sign. The third fire sign of Sagittarius takes what Aries and Leo gives and brings it to an even higher consciousness, right? So all of the elements do this. The 30 degrees of each sign does this. As a planet is moving from 1 to 5, then 17, as it gets to the very last degree, we call this the anaretic degree. It's thought not to be looking where it's going next. It's looking behind itself saying, have I covered everything in this mansion? So I'm describing all of this to you guys this week for you to get this one idea. The 30th degree of Pisces into the 0 degree of Aries is the most sensitive point. And we call it the birth canal of the zodiac because every time we spin through these 12 archetypes, we always come back to the formlessness before we dive again into form. You know, in a way, in the natural wheel of the zodiac, which is no different than a natal chart, the rising sign of the natural wheel is 0 degrees of Aries, right? So the natural wheel has this birth canal as a function of its structure, just like each of us in a birth chart using Placidus' house system, we all have a rising sign. And that rising sign is also like the creative aspect of you, where your 12th house consciousness bursts into the world as your rising sign consciousness. So you can think of the rising sign as the birth canal of you as an individual, where your inner sense of connection to your own unconscious meets the world with that dynamic rising sign energy. There is so much happening in 2025 across this dynamic birth canal point. Venus and Mercury will both cross over it in a retrograde fashion in the months to come. Neptune and Saturn will gather at the last degree of Pisces and merge into Aries this year and then back again only to do it again in 2026. So we're reaching a moment in the year because of stuff we'll talk about that's happening this week in the transits, where this becomes an important idea for you who follow astrology and contextualize your life through it to understand that we are all rebirthing elements of who we are this year in a really significant way. Neptune says we're rebirthing how we connect to spirit. Venus says we're reconnecting to how, to love in a deeper way. Mercury, mind and perception. Saturn, structure that makes life happen through hard work and discipline. So understand this sensitive point so that as we move through the year, and I point it out to you as something that's being activated by any of these transiting planets, and you'll have a sense of why that point is so important for us. So why we're talking about this today, kids, is that tomorrow is the day that the North Node, recently moved into Pisces, will connect with the ruler of Pisces, Neptune, the planet we call the Great Spirit. So the reason why we're talking about this is that tomorrow is an enormously significant day for the collective. The North Node of the Moon moved back into Pisces in January. It's a big sea change for us all as the nodes of the moon point to where eclipses and all of the transformational energies are going to be happening for 18 months. And we are now in the territory where the North Node, our forward movement for the next year and a half, is going to be about connecting to spirit as primary. I'm fond of saying, because I heard this years ago, the most important thing in your life is your spiritual connection, because all else unfolds from that. When you are right with your inner connection to whatever sort of sense of the universe that invented you, however you connect in, when that alignment is good and true and authentic, we move through the world with more faith and grace and a sense of flow. So that's one of the things that's going to be important, especially this year and the beginning of 2026 when life is getting so juicy. The message of the North Node is turn to spirit first, or you will not have the resilience you need to move through the wild changes that are coming this year and next year.
I am feeling that already, Michael.
Well, and I would call this preparatory, right? The nodes of the moon are a collective point, which means that when a transit involves the North Node, the language would be, this is hitting everybody personally and collectively. Right. So one of the things that's happening with Neptune in the North Node of the Moon is that people's belief systems are being attached to the forward movement sensibility of their own lives. I'm experiencing this as a waking up of my angry activated voice, which I still don't know what I'm going to do with, but it's woken up.
Yeah.
And I have to make sure that I align that with my spiritual connection first so that I don't just become my mother railing about fuck the government and fuck insurance and fuck this and fuck that, because that's who my mother was, which is why I've avoided activism all of these years. So when you say, I feel that, then that lets me sort of give some language to the idea that all of us are being more deeply connected to what those beliefs and ideologies are. And so for my camp, that's so that you can lead a life that's steeped in spiritual principles first and foremost. There's lots of people with beliefs and forward movement that are going to be impacted like this, of all of those people who are armed and ready to, fight for their beliefs, which is what's kind of scary about the year ahead. But we are all being prepared on some level by this transit that says, what I'm saying is, we will not make it at the individual or collective level unless we start putting spirit and love and compassion and empathy first. I would say God first, but then the fucking Christians will say, well, we're doing that. It's like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
You're putting hate first and calling it love, and that's disgusting, and it's ruining the planet. So I can't speak to the other side where there's, challenge, but I also believe that we're in a Gordian knot moment in the United States. We are long past kumbaya is going to save us, because it's not. A Gordian knot can only be felled by a swing of a sword. Alexander broke that knot with a big old chop. And so I'm hoping that that chop that we need isn't so devastating that we don't make it through. But it's an interesting conundrum of, if I'm saying we are getting aligned with spirit more directly, but make no mistake about it, if we're not angry at this moment, we won't address the Gordian knot. And then the polarization and the divide will just continue and continue and continue and
Yeah.
continue. So I think that this moment is, in fact, preparing us to trust blind faith, whatever that means for you as an individual. For the Christians who are not listening to my podcast, it's true for you too. Have at it. Deepen your faith in this experience. And if you're, that's not your story and you're sort of someone more, on the progressive and critical thinking side, and the idea that we really are in the age of Aquarius, where we're wanting to create a world where all are cared for, this transit is a marker moment. I would want you to think more of the long range concept of North Node collective forward movement connecting with the ruler of spirit, unconscious forgiveness, and love, Neptune, rather than how's it going to feel tomorrow and Tuesday. This is a broad energy reflecting months and months and really the year ahead's energy. But just like I want you to understand the avatar of the birth canal, 30th Pisces into 0 Aries, I want you also to understand the avatar of the collective future point, dropping in with spirit saying, put this first. Very important week in the Mars retrograde cycle. One of the things that was juicy about last week's new moon in Aquarius is that you had Mars retrograde in Cancer trining the beautiful Pisces stellium. That Pisces stellium, by the way, I'll be talking about this in a few minutes, isn't just the North Node and Neptune, it's also Venus. And we can even consider Saturn as part of it, even though he's a little earlier in degree points. But Mars in retrograde trining all of that Piscean energy is powerful for us in terms of incorporating into our walk through life the spiritual deepening that I'm telling you is happening or possible. So it's like if we anthropomorphize what Mars is saying in Cancer, he's saying, hey, I'm over here helping you rest, prepare, restore, take care of the inner landscape so that you can take on the outer, right? That's what this retrograde's all about. Mars in Cancer preparing us, Mars in Leo helping us center ourselves out there. So that if I'm telling you that the most important thing to center in your walk is your spiritual connection, then it's really powerful that in this week you've got Mars retrograde deepening his interaction with that Pisces stellium. So today, Mars is squaring Chiron. Not comfortable. Mars in his activation is touching into wounded spaces during this retrograde so that we are aware of the stuff under the hood that is needing our adjustments at this time. So you want to look back to mid-October. On October 13th, that was the first time that Mars squared Chiron that replicates today. And at the end of March, it'll hit again, so we're not worried too much about what's to come, but you want to look back to mid-October because anything that was painful or, in fact, a healing triggered at that time, there may very well be themes this week that relate. Over the weekend, Mars is going to trine Saturn. Now, that's an interesting sort of download of responsibility, wisdom, the sense of needing to do the right thing and being aware of what that right thing is. So, if Mars is our action planet and Saturn tempers us and keeps us stable when we might otherwise be, and if Mars in Cancer is saying we got to learn more about self care, then Saturn is certainly saying, yep, 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 that's an important lesson. So Mars trining Saturn this weekend makes the weekend a kind of putting things together about how to walk through life more powerfully. So you get that the beginning of the week, it's about addressing wounds. And by the weekend, it's about integrating whatever you've learned from the wounded consciousness into being able to like move forward with more discipline. Now, back on September 29th, Mars trine Saturn. You might look back to the end of September. Here's the thing, though, kids. Mars wasn't in his shadow then. He was earlier by degree point. So you can look back to late September. September became October. Anything that looked like a lesson about structure or responsibility or doing the right thing or focusing on projects that were requiring a lot of work and effort. If something back in late September is connected to now, then use the backward connection to like contextualize how the weekend goes. And know that like all of these triple transits, we're going to revisit these again in late March and early April. But this week, it becomes an important task to be aware of how the wounds you're working with are inhibiting you or not in your movement forward and projects and work and goals and things you desire to create. That's the message for the beginning of the week. And at the end of the week, look for how solutions are arising and structure and discipline might reveal to you something, like what you got to fix is the beginning of the week, and what you got to do next is the end of the week theme from the Mars retrograde cycle. So here we are in the first reason I explained the birth canal of the zodiac to you guys, because today Venus is crossing it. It's interesting to me that the Venus retrograde moves from a place where Venus is absolutely thrilled to be and the place she absolutely hates being. And then she's going to backtrack into the sign of her exaltation, right? So she's in expansiveness in Pisces, where love is love is love, and forgiveness and compassion are pre-installed. There's no distance between you and your forgiveness in the realm of Venus and Pisces. But Venus hates it in Aries. It's Mars's ruling sign. It's cardinal fire. It's too much aggression for Venus to feel loving and forgiving and compassionate while she's in this sign. Now, this would just be another moment of learning how to stay loving in unloving spaces and how to incorporate more masculine action in your feminine spaces, but it's going to facilitate a retrograde. Venus will get only so far in, about 10 degrees in, and then she'll come back to this sign as part of her retrograde, teaching us not only how to be loving and forgiving and compassionate, but how to birth more of that love and compassion into our aggressive spaces. Aries is the sign of war. Neptune is going to enter the sign of war later on this year. And so Venus and Mercury, because he's going to do this too during both of their next backward journeys, by crossing this path several times, we are all getting acclimated to what it is for us as individuals to deeply tap into our inner connection to love, compassion, spirit, so that we can go meet the world that's burning in an Aries fire, and bring as much love as we possibly can. Now, this process is just beginning, so we've got a lot more twists and turns on the inner landscape to go, both from Mars's experience and Venus's and Mercury, who will join. So what I want you to be paying attention to this week, today, yesterday, tomorrow, is what does your emotional body feel like when it shifts from Venus being in Aries into Pisces? And just check yourself, because anything you can be aware of in your own emotional patterning will be part of what the retrograde is designed to help you process. In fact, on Friday of this week, Venus will move far enough into Aries to sextile Pluto. So that means that as we move towards the end of the week, we have this interesting moment on Friday where our emotional body will be comfortable going in the direction of shadow, power struggles, intense feelings. It's a beautiful interaction of Venus and Pluto in this 60-degree angle. Now, it's colored by the fact that Venus in Aries is on fire when she'd rather be swimming. The Sun and Chiron will be sextiling the same day. So that means on Friday, our conscious awareness and the healing presence is activated and available if you pick the effort up, right? Sextiles need behavior. So if you put some attention towards healing dynamics, your awareness is going to work well with the wounded spaces and the magical spaces and the mystery spaces, sextile Sun and Chiron. And our hearts will be ready to make some deep shifts and changes. And all of this is the first passes of this. So we get a lot of information both today, tomorrow, and Friday about things emotionally that the Venus retrograde cycle is going to bring back up. If you're in a relationship, you can be assured that whatever happens this week from the beginning to the end will repeat when Venus goes retrograde as you deepen relationship dynamics in the retrograde itself. This, of course, is a triple transit, but it doesn't repeat until late March and then again in early May. So we won't be talking about it for a while, but that's why I'm sort of pointing out, pay lots of attention to what's happening in your emotional body with your finances as well, because Venus rules finances, and anything that relates to relationship desires that you have, whether it's you're in one and you want to deepen it or fix it or heal it, or you want to, attract one and you want to bring your power to, with you. And like ever, just pay attention to what's happening in your emotional body and your relationship dynamics, so that when they might return later in the spring, you have the information from this late January, early February period to help navigate challenges that might come up later in the spring. And just one more last shameless plug for my Venus retrograde webinar. That'll help. Check it out. On Sunday of next week, we also have the superior conjunction of Mercury and the Sun. Mercury is never very far away from the Sun because he's the closest planet to the Sun, that fast orbit from our perspective. He can never really be, much more than, I think it's a 28-degree differential or something like that. And so there's an interesting way that the Sun and Mercury and their movements reflect exactly how we operate. But if you don't know this and you're not working with this, then you are trapped by your thinking mind's perception, meaning you're believing everything that you see. And that's, not a great idea. The Sun is our conscious awareness, and Mercury is our thinking mechanism. You can think of the Sun as actually you, whether it's the Sun placement in your natal chart or the idea that a transit like this involving the sun is touching each of us at the individual level. And Mercury is the navigator, the narrator, the part of you that's sort of inserted. I like to think of Mercury and, perceptions in the body as something like that's like staple gunned into our experience as we come out the chute, right? We're born as our sun sign consciousness. And then the universe shoves a thinking mechanism into this beautiful, whole, and complete sense of who we are. So the reason why I'm setting it up like that is because you are not your thoughts. You are the one who's listening to your thoughts. So every Mercury retrograde has a conjunction between the sun and Mercury, and then every 2-month free and clear cycle where Mercury is not retrograde has one of these conjunctions. In the retrograde, we call it the inferior conjunction because the visual would be Mercury in front of the sun from our perspective. So that sort of correlates to Mercury being inside of our psyche, not outside of it. And of course, when Mercury is retrograde, we're bumping into the furniture and can't see clearly. So the day of that inferior conjunction is more important to pay attention to because the guidance or the wisdom that's being offered is coming in sideways ways and happy accidents and synchronicities because Mercury's backwards. So you don't have to look as hard for the sort of trickster ways that Mercury is speaking to us on Sunday. But it is an important moment of guidance if you should choose to use it. Use this Sunday to maybe sit down and do an inventory. Mercury is the mind, so writing is always a good idea. Or do some sort of a meditation that connects you back to the center of your being and away from the monkey mind, random thinking, invasive thoughts that might be part of your human experience. And if nothing else, just pay attention to everything that is said, either to you or by you, not only Sunday, but Saturday and Monday as well. And just know that there might be some interesting information about where to go next.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show.
This week we have an email and dream from Letty. And she says, "Hi, Michael and Zoe. I recently began listening to your podcast and have been finding a new understanding for astrology and the application of it in my life. Thank you for your work and the lessons so far." Okay, so then there's a content warning of military themes and PTSD.
Okay.
I don't know. It sounds very of the moment.
Sounds good.
I dreamt that I was in a strange apartment, tenement complex with my mother, father, and middle sister and niece. In my dream, I'm sitting in a courtyard with my sister, and she's telling me she's decided to convert to Mormonism for her husband. I am shocked by this. My sister was once in a Christian cult in high school, but has since shown no interest in any Christian faiths. In the dream, She makes the statement to me as a way of saying she's figured out how to stay safe. My niece is in the house. I cannot see her, but I know she's inside with her child. In my dream, I understand that they all live there and have just arrived. My parents have asked me to come with them somewhere. I later learned it's because they're taking me somewhere for processing. They have been given custody of me again in this dream and are responsible for me. And they decide that it's best I be re-enlisted in the military. And then she put some context. I'm a disabled veteran of the United States Navy in real life, and in the dream I'm feeling confused and betrayed by my family. They turn me in and relinquish custody of me to the government. I am immediately put in tactical gear and put in line behind other enlisted personnel. We look like black-clad stormtroopers. A notable new part of this experience for me is that we have all been outfitted with an electrical shock collar at the basis of our skulls.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that when we fall out of line, we are shocked and immediately collapse. In my dream, I realize this when I'm unsuccessful in joining the line in time. I am shocked the first time and collapse. I swear out loud and I'm shocked a second time before I'm even able to get up from the first shock. I finally compose myself and get back into line and begin marching. And for fun, I'm shocked a third time.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. I hear them laughing as I lay on the floor and everything goes dark. Then I wake up. She adds a little more context. I don't have dreams about my time in the military as frequently anymore, as it has been 20 years since my time in service, and I'm in intensive treatment. When I do have dreams about my time in, I don't recall as intensely and clearly. Usually my dreams about my time in are more sensory or intuitive, and this one was cinematic. Thank you for your time, and I hope to hear your thoughts.
This is very interesting information, that last bit. Right. We know that Letty's dreaming of military because it's like in her path.
Right.
Right. So I appreciate the distinction between like what would probably be a whole category of dreams that she has on a regular basis that harkens back to that time, those sensory dreams that she says that she's had. But this one is different. This is more intuitive. And it is, I think, about some consideration of past patterns. And not necessarily Letty in a body who went to the military, who has to maybe continue to process things that her life brought her through. So we know we're talking about family history because not only is mother and father and sister and niece there in the dream, she refers to a strange apartment tenement. If Letty were here, I would be asking about that word tenement.
Like what it means to her.
Right, because it's a very specific sort of kind of dwelling. So tenements imply poverty and multi-generational dwelling. You know, without Letty here, we've only have my projections of tenement, right? And so as a New Yorker whose grandfather was born on the Lower East Side in tenements, you know, my mother was born in New York City, lived in a tenement. By the way, her tenement homes now are like $2 million condos in the West Village.
Wow.
But back in the 30s, they were where, you know, immigrant families are crammed in. So there's something about strange apartment, which means Letty's in some consideration of an aspect of self that is strange to her, that does connect to family history. And I don't know what else to say about tenement without her here, but Letty, I'm sure you're listening. Think about why that phrase, or that word, which might have something very personal, like a personal association for you, Letty, or it just might connect to aspects of life that are, I don't know, challenging or messy or harder. Tenement life is harder than life on the hill.
Right. It's
Okay,
difficult
right there, right?
for sure.
That I think I landed. That's it. Like that's what I mean, Letty, on some level, and you just fill in your personal other associations that you might have. So there's something interesting about the sister in the dream because she's the aspect of character in the dream. So I'm talking about your, Letty's sister as a function of aspects of Letty that are like her sister. We're looking for a way to stay safe. And it's interesting that the sister is both in life and in the dream susceptible to sort of lower cult-like ideologies. Meaning in real life, she was in fact in a cult. It means that she has the consciousness to find her safety by surrendering to some structure of society that is very rigid and ruled. That's what a cult is. People feel comfortable in cults because everything is handled. Look at the cult of Trumpism.
Yeah.
All those people happily comfortable and confident that their world is, coming back. Meanwhile, voting against their best interests. And cults give people comfort, structure, answers, and safety. So at a moment where the world is falling apart and war is part of that, you've got war raging in several places on the planet, and you've got civil war brewing in the United States in an earnest way. And every fucking one of us wants to figure out how we're going to stay safe. So one of the things that's interesting about the military is it's the warrior archetype that's activated. Military, cops. Any warrior archetype is about simplifying things down to right and wrong. If it's right, I fight for it. If it's wrong, I fight against it. And fight is the common denominator there. So there's no question about what we do and how we attend to something because we know we're going to divide the idea into right and wrong. So I can certainly see military as a solution when looking at the current landscape of like confusing options and unfoldings and scary violence and all kinds of chaos rising up on the planet, that all of us looking for the how do I make sense of this, I think military might be rising up as, at least in military consciousness, we'd know what was right and what was wrong, and we could make decisions about that. So now we get into territory that might be about Letty relating to her family at this crazy time. Like, boy, would I like to know what the talk of, politics and, lifestyle are in that house. Because the dream is showing us that there's this effort to get Letty back into line.
Yeah.
And it's literal, back into line, get into line, and we're going to shock you. And I love that there are 3 shocks, right? That she gets shocked once and then twice, and that gets her back in line. And then she's shocked for the 3rd time just for shits and giggles. But to me, that 3rd time is what makes it an image worth considering, because 3 is a sacred number. Once you have 3, you've got creativity in the room. So there's some energy of either editing or dismissal or limit. The dream is expressing that she feels somehow controlled. And this section is interesting because it's the family that's trying to process. You heard me, go when she said, when you read that they were taking her for processing, I went, ooh, because suddenly it got juicy. So now we know the dream is reflecting some rejection of something that is trying to be squeezed onto Letty. And again, I would be asking her all about the conversations in her family, about how to perceive the current moment. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's not, Letty, if you're listening. To me, that whole thing of getting shocked and getting shocked that third time is that your deeper psyche is telling you to wake up from conformity. And again, maybe I'm projecting because my activated angry voice is getting woken up, and I think I want Letty's to as well.
Yeah.
Don't get in line. Don't say, oh, this is right or this is wrong if you don't feel it. Yell to the rooftops when something is wrong. In some ways, the ending of the dream asks more questions than it answers. Because Letty finishes the dream by getting back into line. But every other element of how she describes the dream tells me that that is not what her soul wants her to do, that her soul wants her to break out of that conformity and that lining up or falling in. So Letty, if we did you a solid, let us know. And if we missed the boat, let us know too. And have at it.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.